Monday, March 24th. I'm Adam Walsh, and this is The Signal. Today on the show, the federal election campaign is underway, and we've got money on our minds. We're asking, what are your hopes for the economy and your personal finances under the next federal government? Just to start things, here's a little announcement from this show. So the writ has dropped, and I want to hear from you. The team wants to hear from you. So through this whole federal election campaign, doesn't matter the hour, doesn't matter the day, but I'm just thinking with all the news and all the noise that is happening right now, your thoughts, your specific thoughts are important to us on The Signal. What are you not hearing from politicians? What is something that matters to you? We want those thoughts every day because what we'll do is we'll either play them on the show, we'll talk about them, or they will help us with our programming. So those questions again. So this is an everyday question until the federal election is done and dusted. We want your thoughts, so here we go. What are you not hearing, and what is something that matters to you? Email us any day, anytime, any hour, thesignal@cbc.ca, or call the Signal line and leave a message, 709-576-5260. For today's show, the phone lines will be open in a little bit because, like I said in my intro there, we're talking about the economy, your personal finances, and we're asking, what are your hopes for the national economy, your personal finances under the next federal government? And like I said, the lines will be open shortly. Meanwhile, today, with my guests that I will introduce now in 2 seconds, we will talk about everything from the stock market to mortgages to interest rates to national and provincial economies. No shortage of stuff to talk about. And later on in the show, you will hear about a local incubator project and what they're trying to do with their own thoughts around getting folks working in the economy. My guest, Larry Short, Senior Wealth Advisor with Short Financial, IA Private Wealth. How you doing? Yeah, you're on.
Oh,
yeah. We've started.
How are you?
Yeah, good.
I was fully distracted. Sorry.
Well, it is all good. How you been?
Quite good, actually. As you can imagine, with all of the news that's out there, there's a few questions coming in from a lot of people. And I was before we were live here, it was saying that doing things like Rotary luncheons, updating people about here's what they.
How do those work, anyways?
Oh, just someone calls the office and says, "Can you give us an update? Would you mind dropping in?" And as part of the financial literacy, I'm on the financial literacy board for CPA Canada, and as part of that, we're more than happy for any service group or the like to come and do a bit of a chat. And I've got another one coming up in April, but it's a matter of calling the office and contacting us. Or just go to our website and you'll find the contacts there.
Yeah, helping out with financial literacy, which is important.
Huge, yes, because everybody has questions here, and they're trying to sort through the chaff to find what is really meaningful here. Because these days it seems to be the more extreme the headline, the more eyeballs are on it, but that's not necessarily what you should be looking at.
Which brings me to the big opening question, right? Let's go broad picture first. Right?
Sure.
Paint me a picture of the economic time we are in right now, and then we can pick into like what that means for folks, their pocketbooks, or also thinking about the national economy.
Okay, so up until the point when this self-inflicted series of wounds called tariffs came into the picture, the economies of North America, in fact, the world, were looking pretty decent. Interest rates were coming down, inflation was dropping, growth was picking up even further. There were some good initiatives that were happening. Then this tariff thing comes up and throws an absolute wrench into everything. And to understand that this tariff is not about money. Right. This is not just to give you a picture of the silliness. Let's just look at Canadian oil. Right. So Canada exports 4.6 million barrels of oil to the U.S. a day. And one of the reasons why the Americans want this oil is because all the way back in 2002, 2003, they had just finished upgrading their refineries to process heavy crude. And the reason they were processing heavy crude is way back then we thought we were running out of oil. So the big sources of oil in the world were going to be Canada, Alberta, and Venezuela. And as a consequence, they spent all this money, billions and billions of dollars, to upgrade their refineries in order to process this crude. Then fracking comes along. And that fracking is super light crude. I mean, it's almost gasoline. Well, it's like, somebody will correct me, but it's pretty light. And for them to get these refineries to operate optimally, they have to blend in the heavy crude.
Yeah.
Right. So then the genius in the U.S. figures they'll put 10% tariff on Alberta oil. So just hang with me for 1 second.
I'm with you.
All right. So cost of Alberta oil today is $56 a barrel. Let's put 10% on that. That's $61.77. It's still cheaper than all of the oil in the United States. So what have you done? You've not Alberta's still going to sell the same amount of oil, maybe marginally less, a bit, but certainly not anything significant. They're still going to get the royalties. They're still going to get the profits. But all you've done is raise the price of gasoline in the United States by 85 or 90 cents. What was accomplished by doing that? Similar sort of thing when it comes to aluminum. Putting a 25% tariff on aluminum. So the theory with tariffs is that you would protect an industry that is in your own country that can replace, in this case, aluminum. In order for the U.S. to replace Canadian aluminum, they need to build 4 Hoover dams, or they need to build nuclear power plants that will replace 4 Hoover dams. And they need to do it now. But it'll take 10 to 15 years to even if they started tomorrow with all the approvals. So it's almost nonsensical as to what they're going through. And the theory that we're proceeding with is the fact that this is not a MAGA agenda. This is something else. Because the people that elected Trump were electing for him to lower the price of eggs and to get gasoline prices down, get employment up, get industries relocating. This won't do any of that. No. If anything, it'll raise prices, particularly in the U.S. And initially, when I saw the tariffs go on, and I was thinking, well, Canada's best response is just to ignore it, because the problem is that if we raise tariffs, then Trump can turn and say, "See, those evil Canadians raised the price on your food and transportation and everything." Whereas if we ignore them, then we didn't raise any tariffs, and people might see that as self-inflicted damage. Now, mind you, so what the feds have done is they've targeted the red states, which was actually pretty smart, right? Because it'll get them more upset. And then eventually, as we see inflation pick up in the U.S., which is more than likely going to happen if this goes ahead, then at some point we think that he will have burnt through his political capital, and that they'll actually get something that looks like the Republicans saying, hey, we need to fundraise now for the elections in 2 years, because the Americans are always in that election cycle, and they may get some pushback. And we're seeing that with like Fox News, Fox News actually being critical of Donald Trump.
Yes, I've seen clips of this, right?
I'm shocked, right? Like things like one guy talking about the price of automobiles going up, and another one talking about, they want people to retire, but how do they retire with their 401ks, which is like their RSPs, dropping so significantly? So the U.S. stock market has started to hurt. It's actually hurting more than the Canadian stock market. It's not huge. It's down about 10, 12%. But, up to this point, it kept going higher. And he was promising, he'd have all these problems solved on day one. So we're starting to see some pushback. And if I had to put numbers, a time on it, I'd say probably May is probably when we'll see the pushback get to the point where we may see some change.
All right. So then for folks who are sitting at home thinking, okay, what does this mean for me?
Yep. So for Canada, what's interesting is that aluminum is in short supply around the world. So there's other places you can sell it. And the plants are located in the St. Lawrence River area, and if you can get anything on a boat, you can sell it anywhere in the world. It's 12 times cheaper to ship something by boat than it is by truck. So, there's a ready market for this. Yeah. For oil, it's a bit of a problem, but then again, I don't really think that there's going to be a huge impact with less purchases from Alberta. For Newfoundland, that oil is on a boat already, right? So we can sell it anywhere. In Newfoundland in particular, the mining sector is the other part, right? But a lot of what's going to the iron ore that we ship, so collectively, between mining and oil, that's about 25% of what the provincial economy is. So the mining part, iron ore, a lot of those customers are Japanese and European anyway.
Yeah.
So there we go here. And then the interesting thing is the largest single buyer of nickel from Voisey's Bay is Tesla. You talk about irony, right?
Yeah.
And the reason they want it is because it's refined using hydroelectricity, right? Because the Tesla buyers wanted to have green nickel,
yeah,
right, which is what this stuff is. So that's a bit ironic. But for the most part, except for maybe fresh fish,
yeah,
that's the real thorn here as to how that's going to be handled and whether or not we can do something with Europe fast enough in order to replace that.
So this is what we're looking at with the economy, right? So those are some of the points to pay attention to for people in their households, right? When we think about what, like if I'm paying attention to this and I'm thinking like, okay, well, what will this mean for the province? Because the other bit is, you've got that R word, recession, that's floating around for the Canadian economy. Should folks here then individually be like, oh, if a recession coming, that could be really bad. What's the outlook then, do you think, for us if there's a Canadian recession?
Well, so a couple of things there. One is that, the silver lining, because every crisis has one, is that it was a wake-up call for Canada to say, you know what, we really do need pipelines, whether they're natural gas or oil. We need them across the country. We need an energy corridor that works. We need interprovincial trade barriers to drop. All of those things were things that were niggling problems that we've had in the past, and some of them very large.
And this is all stuff that right now the main political, the Conservatives and Liberals are definitely talking about, and then to some degree, depending on the range of what you just said, the NDP.
Yeah. So the Liberals and Conservatives are agreeing on this. So there's a shock, I'm personally trying to get them to call that energy corridor the Trump corridor, just to rub it in somebody's nose. But the net effect of it is that depending on how quickly we can react, and whether or not we can set up free trade agreements with Europe, for example, because the largest importer of aluminum on the planet is the United States. The second largest is Europe, right? And there's a shortage of aluminum, and basically aluminum is driven by electrical prices, and Canada has tremendous amounts of electricity, right? There's a shortage of electricity on the planet. So there may be very definite benefits coming from this. In the short run, it's a question of how the federal government, can ease the problem when certain specific industries are hit harder. But it's not like we haven't seen this before, because it's like softwood lumber industry has been under tariff for many, many years. And then the other situation is that locally, I'm not sure if people, most of your listeners would remember 2008, 2009, 2010, there was a recession in North America. In fact, it was a worldwide recession. And the province of Newfoundland and Labrador completely skipped it because we had development from Muskrat Falls. Well, depending on where we are with the Quebec-Newfoundland hydro deal, if we start developing just as we go into a recession in the rest of the country, we may not see the effects here in this province at all.
Right. Okay. So that's a good, there's a range there.
Yeah.
And it depends on which way we go with policy and decisions and everything else. But that's interesting. Mm. So then if I'm a household and I'm thinking of, okay, we've got the economy doing what it's going to do. Maybe we'll be okay through a possible recession. We're looking at everything else. What for people's individual pocketbooks? Yeah. What should they be thinking about?
Okay, so when it comes to investing, like your RSP, et cetera, right? So a couple of things there. One is the fact that pretty much since I'm trying to think, it's probably 2008, 2009, the U.S. and to a lesser extent Canada has certainly provided the best that market, the U.S. market, stock market, provided the best returns in the world. That's not happened in the last 3 months-ish. It's actually Europe has started to really outperforming the U.S. So the U.S. market's off again about 10-12%. Canada's off about I think 9 and a bit, depending on the time of day. But Europe is actually in positive. So this shift is also a kick in the butt to Europe as well about get your act together, that you can't depend on the U.S. in a number of ways. And so for the first time in a long time, diversifying money into Europe and Japan in particular is worth having that conversation with your investment advisor. So part that to one side. So that's the stock side. Now, and don't forget Canada because, we've got a weaker Canadian dollar. Well, whenever you have a weaker Canadian dollar, our exports do really, really well, right? Like, copper, nickel, zinc, all the things that the world needs, even the U.S., even with them putting tariffs on it, there's still going to be a need for this it effectively drives up the price of the commodity, and other places around the world are still competing in the world market against Canadian copper, nickel, zinc, et cetera, and iron ore. So Canada still has some good solid opportunities. Again, for you individually, you need to sit with your advisor and say what sectors should you be emphasizing, one side or the other. The other part is bonds, right? So whenever we talk about in our industry something as complicated as asset allocation, right? That's a jargon word, which really means how much do you have in stocks, how much do you have in bonds, and then within both, how much is short term, how much is long term, how much is in utilities, how much is in banks, et cetera. That conversation just between stocks and bonds. If we do indeed go in a recession in the rest of Canada, then interest rates will drop. When interest rates drop, bonds do really well. Most of the time. You got to watch where you are, but as a general statement. So if somebody had 50% of the money in stocks and 50% in bonds, that 50% in bonds is going to do well. Depending on what stocks that you're in, you may still benefit if you're, utilities, banks, whatever, but you need to have that conversation as opposed to being 100% in U.S. market at this point in time. So have that conversation with your investment advisor to say, am I worried about the markets? That's piece one. If you are, should you have more bonds than stocks right now? And if you're really worried about the market and worried that inflation may come back because of the tariffs in the U.S., at some point, because remember, we eat the same cornflakes, right? So if the price of cornflakes goes up there, it's going to go up in Canada. All right, this is what we learned from COVID, was that the inflation that showed up in Canada also showed up in the U.S., also showed up in Australia, also showed up in Europe, right? So if inflation starts to pick up in the U.S., we'll start to see it here in Canada. So if you're worried about inflation, then that will affect your long-term bonds. Have that conversation with your advisor. And if you're worried about the market, then you go more into bonds short term.
And for mortgages?
Yes, really good. So mortgage rates are way down from where they were even at this time last year. Yeah. They may be getting closer to a bottom. And if you're contemplating, if you've got a mortgage coming due like in the next 3 months in particular, might be time to have a chat with your mortgage provider. And say, can I lock in a rate now? But if it gets cheaper, can I get that? Yeah. Right? So I find that people often are a little bit too passive when it comes to their mortgage. So they call up, their institution and say, what rate am I going to get? Here it is, and away you go. Boy, oh boy, you can go online and their competition is fierce and ferocious. The banks are trying to lock people in, now for longer terms. And some of the rates look really, really good. Just be very careful of the penalties, because the penalties apparently have increased in some cases. So that if you did a 5-year mortgage and 4 years from now you wanted to get out, in the old days you had to pay 3 months interest. These days it might be different. So be very careful on the penalties to get out, particularly if it's a really good teaser rate. And generally the rates that are posted are called sheet rates, which means that this is the advertised rate. And sometimes you have to do this dance where it's like, can you do any better? Well, I can get you a quarter. Can you do any better than that? Well, I got to talk to my manager. Yeah. Oh, got to talk to the manager. Okay. And then you talk to the manager. Oh, I got to talk to regional. Oh, you go talk to regional. And then I got to talk to national. Well, go talk to national to begin with and find out what the real rate is and get at least 2 providers competing for your money. And that's gives you the best, usually the best opportunities.
Yeah. It can make a big difference month to month, right? Like your mortgage.
Oh.
Depending on what rate you get. So what's a good rate looking at right now?
Well, you can Google, like we're below 4% on if you Google on the internet and say and just type in best mortgage rate 5 years.
Yeah.
Often you'll see something 3.99. I mean, that was 7 and a bit a year and a half ago.
Wow.
Right. And some of the banks were over 8. And again, be careful because sometimes that's for somebody who's AAA rated, really doesn't need a mortgage, right? But it's a teaser rate. But again, this is why you get into it with various institutions and credit unions. Don't forget credit unions, that you get them competing back and forth, and sometimes they can really get you a really, really nice rate. We've had people who've been dealing with the same institution for many, many years and then called up and said, I can get such and such a rate off the internet, and it was dropped by a full percentage point a year and a half ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
you're listening to The Signal. I'm Adam Walsh. Today on the show, we're talking about money, but we're also looking at the federal election campaign, which is underway. And we're asking, what are your hopes for either the economy or your personal finances under the next federal government? If you want to weigh in on this discussion, the phone lines are open, 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. You can text us, 709-327-8206. Email us, thesignal@cbc.ca. You got a couple of books there, Larry. What did you bring in?
So this is a book we put out a couple of years ago called Successful Investing During Turbulent Times. And what it did is in the book we look back at periods of times in the past to see what was common between various and downturns in the overall market. In particular, what we found is a bit of a pattern, and the pattern is how people are behaving. So individuals tend to be very excited as a market peaks. As the market first starts to turn down, they tend to say, maybe it's just a little bit offset, whatever. And then by the time they get to, the markets are really getting to start to bottom, they throw in the towel. And in the book, it shows what used to be newspaper headlines and now would be, internet headlines of what's typical during a market top and during a market bottom.
All right, so that's Larry Short there, Senior Wealth Advisor with Short Financial IA Private Wealth. And the questions for today, folks, with money on our mind, with the economies of either the province or the country, we're asking, what are your hopes for the economy and your personal finances and or under the next federal government? The numbers to call, 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. And we will give those books away either today or with folks who call. We'll probably draw, we've got a few books to give away. So we'll before the week is out, folks will have those books. We've got someone else here in studio as well. Audrey Parnell is here, manager circular economy with econext. How you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Adam.
Thanks for popping in. All right, so the reason why you're here, because there's an incubator that is being launched. And I find this interesting because when we're talking about the economy, there's always a discussion around having to diversify the economy, looking at different ways to make some money in with jobs. And so incubators interest me. Tell us about, is it the Project Zero Econext Circular Economy Incubator?
It is.
I was Googling this morning.
Yes, I will take a step back first and just talk a little bit about the circular economy, because I think this is a term that people get a little overwhelmed by, or maybe just think sounds like they don't have anything to do with their day-to-day lives. But circular economy is something that we all touch all the time. So really the circular economy is just not stepping away from single-use items and our single-use kind of linear. We extract a resource, we make a good, we use it, and we dispose of it. So circular economy is giving all of those goods second lives. So whether it's you're shopping at a secondhand or vintage shop, whether you're choosing to repair something versus throwing it away, whether you're taking your organic waste, turning it into compost, and then using that in your backyard are all kind of basic examples of circular economy that we all participate in, probably with some frequency and just never think about as actually being the circular economy. But what we are going to do at econext is we have partnered with an organization from British Columbia, the Synergy Foundation, that since 2019 has run an incubator program to help businesses get started in the circular economy. So this is anywhere from people who have maybe a business started, but they're not quite sure how to kind of grow and expand their initial idea, to people who are really just in the concept stage. And it provides them with sessions to kind of help them really flesh out their business plan. It helps them figure out how to connect with funders, how to figure out the best way to be legally compliant in the places that they're operating. Yeah. It provides them with mentorship to really, at the end, culminate in a pitch event where they'll have a robust business plan and really be able to move their idea to the next stage.
So what's the calendar like for you folks when it comes to this and recruitment?
So yes, right now our applications are open, and we've had 3 applicants. We're very excited. We'd love to have as many as possible. What we are really fortunate to be able to do is to run this program virtually. So right now we have, I think, primarily applicants from the metro area, but we'd love to have people from all across Newfoundland and Labrador. It's virtual. It's free to participate. The expectation is about 4 hours of your time a month as an entrepreneur. It would run from May to December, with our applications closing on April 6th. And then we have our pitch event in December. So it'll be kind of just one session every 3 weeks.
Why? Like I know you mentioned about circular economy and what you're trying to do and the partnership on the West Coast and all of that. Why do you think this is so important?
I think it's important for a number of reasons. One, it's a really great way to kind of stimulate the economy. We have all of these products in our lives all the time that we just discard, and there's still quite a lot of value in these things. And so really being able to kind of maximize, as we're all more cost conscious these days, being able to take our goods and extract ever increasing more value out of them is more important to everyday households. And certainly if you've got an idea that maybe you didn't think would work, this also gives you a chance to test that out and see, is it possible that I could start my own business or my own enterprise, or I could take something I do once a year and there's enough funding out there through the provincial government, through federal governments, through programs that are at the Multi-Materials Stewardship Board, and I could actually turn this into my full-time job and develop more employment in the provincial economy as well.
Excellent. All right, sit tight. I'm going to come back to you in a second. We've got an email and someone on the line. So first we'll go to the email. This is to you, Larry. Mark, it says, Mark Carney's election promised to cut 1% of the lowest tax bracket. What does that equate to for the average taxpayer in NL? Is the question. And, off the top of your head, I mean, I obviously don't know.
Well, it's a couple of $100. It's not huge. I mean, that's symbolic.
I think he said, for the year, for family or for 2 folks, it could be like up to $800 or something.
Yeah. So it's not a monstrous amount, but at least he's talking about tax cuts, right? And
you've got the Conservatives saying as well, promising 15% income tax for the average.
So this is early days. We'll see how the bidding war goes on. Who can promise the most. Yeah. Until one gets in and says, well, this thing's worse than the other. Sorry, I don't mean to be a pessimist, but these are politicians, and they tend to promise a lot, and then when they get in, they not necessarily follow through in all cases, and the public tends to forget about that. So holding their feet to the fire, it's nice to see it in writing, but that's not going to change the world.
All right. Thanks for that, folks. So the emails, the signal at cbc.ca, 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255 are the numbers and the questions for today. With this federal election campaign underway, what are your hopes for the economy and your personal finances under the next federal government? Daryl is on the line from Gander. Hi, Daryl.
Oh, hi. Thanks for having me on your show there today. Great show as usual.
Thank you.
What I want to address here today is one thing, like to be more self-reliant, don't depend on other countries. We got to be more independent than what we have been. Is that, like, you look at over in Germany, they got a system that when you go in shop, you got to buy German products first and everything else is secondary. And that's how it's geared by law over in Germany, which we should be doing in Canada. When you go in trying to figure out which products from where, it should be out in the forefront that Canada products, then everything should be secondary. And that's what they do in Germany. And also, I'm going to allude to a couple of things. The interprovincial trade, yes, now they're hoping by 1st of July. But if they want, right now we're sitting on $240 billion just interprovincial trade. If we just capitalize on that alone, that would solve most of our problems. Not totally. That would solve a lot of our problems. And the model to look at is the Australian model, or Australian or European, but the Australian model is stellar. So we should be taking a look at that as well. But what I don't understand totally, we got a free trade agreement in place. So technically, from what I could gather, Mexico, if he came out and said that they can't do this because due to the free trade agreement. So you got an agreement in place. They can't do this tariff thing. Because what I'm looking at now, I'm seeing a lot of political mongering. News, okay, I'm going to fight Trump, and work for Doug Ford and whatever. But I'm not hearing nothing on this free trade thing. And it's not being talked about by the politicians or hardly anybody. That under the free trade agreement, which is in existence until 2026, they can't put any tariffs there. So this is what we got to start looking at, all these other avenues. And our energy is being wasted on the 51st state and all that stuff. That's not going to happen unless we agree to it. And, so we got to be more positive and productive in other ways rather than like Trump, which is all negative, and we got to start focusing in a positive way. I encourage most people you Google the law of attraction. Positivity, what you send out is what you receive. So this is what we got to change the mindset for the better, and in the long run, we'll be more productive.
Thanks for that, Daryl, and I appreciate the positive mindset. I'll put this to Larry now, and I appreciate your call.
All right, thank you, and all the best to you and Larry.
Pleasure. So a couple quick things there. One is that just start from the end and go backwards. The only reason why Trump is doing all of this is because he wants attention. Okay, there's no question of that. Like all of these, I'll call them royal decrees that he's issuing, because he believes he's a king. They don't have teeth. All right, under the U.S. Set up in their government, it is Congress that has to allocate money. Right. So even last week we saw that they ran up to their debt limit. Trump can write as many executive orders as he wanted to. That doesn't touch the debt limit. It has to be a vote in Congress. Similarly, a lot of what he's already said to do, he's going to fire people, whatever, they still got to back that up with Congress. So Trump is out. He's violating all of these various tariffs and agreements. He doesn't care. And there's no way to hold his feet to the fire until the public in the United States get up in arms. So just park that to one side. Second thing, when it comes to interprovincial trade, here's the difficulty with it. Trade in North America is north-south. Australia, the climate doesn't really make that much of a difference from north to south. I mean, if you get all the way down to Tasmania, sure it does. But for the most part, where the most of the population is, they're growing the same crops. We're not doing that in North America. And in fact, just give you a historic context, during the American Civil War, and I mean the first one because there might be a second one coming up shortly, the American Civil War, the generals were frustrated. They couldn't move troops east-west because all the railway lines went north-south. Right. So the same sort of thing shows up here. Now, that being said, I'm always frustrated why I can't get Nova Scotia apples because, my gosh, the apples they produce are extraordinary, and we're getting them from California or whatever. But just generally speaking, there will be some increase in overall trade in the country by getting rid of those barriers, but I don't think it's going to be a panacea for all of our problems.
Audrey Parnell, what are your whether it's your thoughts on this or we can go back more to the circular economy, what do you think?
Well, I liked the end of the question when it comes to, the idea that positive mindsets and attracting positive things. And I think that that's true. And we have a chance here in the province to kind of begin to focus on how do we stimulate growth in our own economy in Newfoundland and Labrador. And this is kind of where circular economy fits into that. And so really beginning to take a look at what are the things that we throw away every day and how could we get them a second lease on life. A number of circular enterprises have gotten started over the past couple of years, and so taking a look at those, like whether it's the Newfoundland Glass Cooperative, and taking a look at how do we use sand, because this is a product that we use municipalities buy sand and they put it in places like baseball diamonds. We need sand in places where there are coastal erosion. All across Newfoundland and Labrador are communities that are closer to the sea. And so thinking about how we can make a use of a commodity like glass that we just throw away here and turn that into sand that we can then use in the municipal realm to then not have to purchase sand that's probably coming from elsewhere. So how do we, even as businesses, take a look at our supply chains and say, I'm buying something that's coming from somewhere else. What is an opportunity to buy this product locally? And what's missing in our Newfoundland supply chain ecosystem that we could really easily start and pivot to make ourselves here?
And I find it interesting. So I'll talk to someone like yourself today, but there's also Genesis, right?
Yes.
The Genesis at our award-winning innovation hub for technology startups through the Memorial University. According to Genesis, since opening in '97, Genesis companies have raised $730 million in private capital, $700 million of annual recurring revenues are generated, more than 2,500 jobs. You've got a social ventures incubator,
yes,
and a co-op incubator. So there's lots of effort around with the local economy in this time of tariffs, in this time of wondering where we're going with the national economy and everything else.
Yes, and we all kind of do slightly different things. So I've had really lovely conversations with the Center for Social Enterprise about their incubator program. And their program, as well as the one at Genesis Center, are really focused around Memorial University and people affiliated with the university. So our program is a little bit broader in that you could be a university student, you could be a mom, you could be someone who's retired. Anyone across the province can participate in our program. There is no need to be affiliated with anything else.
Bar, yeah.
No, there is no bar.
Come on, yeah.
Yes. As long as you've got the time, we would love to have you in our program. I'm trying to think. Was there a second part of that question?
I think that was great. And I've got another email in for Larry here now, too. This is from Gary. The stock market is up and down depending on what Trump says and also the tariffs. Dow up 545, TSX up 323 today last I looked. I have noticed that Fortis has generally been going up since all the talk about tariffs. The tariffs will have an effect on both sides of the border. How bad remains to be seen. So it's a comment from Gary. Just sent us a note.
Yes, and at the beginning of this, when we first started talking, you were saying, can we take a broad brush look at the overall picture? One author I think I need to highlight is a guy by the name of Peter Zeihan, Z-I-E-H-A-N. He's written a book, and don't buy it because it's about 4 Sears catalogs in thickness. Remember the old Sears catalog?
I do remember the old Sears catalog.
Yeah, so it's huge. But he does these lectures on YouTube that are very, very good. And the title of it is "The End of the World is Just Beginning," and it's an overview about where the world is going in general. And why I follow him is he was the only author that I know about who predicted the invasion of Ukraine 2 years before it happened. And he explains why Russia is doing this, but also what's going on in the United States. And he's been wrong on short-term forecasts, but he's been generally right overall. So if someone is looking for beyond this conversation that we're having today, it's this chap, Zeihan, that to follow and get his updates and be able to see to make some sense of what's happening. And it's his term, political capital, that I've borrowed in the conversation to explain, the wariness of the U.S., where we're starting to see consumers there starting to get up and protest. We're starting to see town hall meetings. Republicans are almost getting lynched, or just not showing up whatsoever. Yep. And the pressure that is building there. So that's the overall picture. So I thought that might be of help.
I'm curious to see what happens this summer in the United States. Right, once winter is over into spring, summer, these protests start to. I'm very curious as to what the political situation of this summer will bring for us all.
Well, understand. You hear of the U.S. president's first 100 days, and that's the honeymoon. Yeah. We're in the honeymoon and people are protesting, right? So where does this go when suddenly the people who are looking for their social services check in the United States can't get anybody to answer the phone? When they go to the parks and there are no park rangers, so the parks are closed. Those sorts of things are starting to build. And then the price of gasoline goes up because they've got a 10% tariff on Alberta oil. And automobile prices start to rise, et cetera. So it's going to be really interesting to see. And that's why I picked around May, June is probably when we're going to see the protests build up. Because, again, the Republicans do have to start fundraising in order for their midterms in 2026. And although Elon Musk could write a check for all of them, the purpose of the check there is to get the message out. And if they don't have a message, then that's when they start to push back.
We've got Patrick on the line in St. John's. Hi.
Hello.
How you doing?
Good, Adam. Good. You mentioned that you wanted us to call in if there was something we weren't hearing in the news.
Sure, yeah, bring it up.
Yeah, it's tolls on ferries regarding interprovincial trade. The premiers had a meeting in Ottawa on March 21st, and immediately after that meeting, the PEI premier got on and said there will be positive news coming shortly on tolls on the Confederation Bridge and also on the ferries, the ferry that runs to Prince Edward Island from Nova Scotia, and that's subsidized by the federal government. And also the two MPs from PEI also issued statements saying the same thing. And then Prime Minister Carney that night on the national news said that there would be announcements soon that would be go towards dropping barriers to interprovincial trade. So my point is, if PEI is going to get their extension to the Trans-Canada Highway, and that's what they call it, the tolls dropped, then we should be getting it too in Newfoundland, because we're both in the same boat. You know, we both have extensions to the Trans-Canada that our interprovincial trade depends on, right?
Yeah, and things tend to be more expensive in Newfoundland and Labrador for when we're buying food and the whatnot because of the cost of getting stuff in here, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think that we should be getting the same consideration for our tolls as PEI is going to get.
And that kind of a thing. I mean, and for this show, when we're talking about our pocketbooks, when we're talking about from household economies to the provincial economy, national one, if it's cheaper to have stuff here, then that means something for individual pocketbooks.
Yes, for sure it does. So I think that's something that we need to watch, and there should be an announcement coming out soon regarding tolls on ferries that are adding to that cost of interprovincial trade. And the feds are set to make announcements in that regard. You know, that our tolls should go down.
All right.
There.
Excellent.
You know,
Patrick,
that's something we need to watch.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I thank you for flagging it, and we'll talk about it now, and the calls appreciate it.
Yeah. There was a CBC news item on March 21st at 9:15 p.m. Regarding this news coming out of PEI after the Premier's meeting with the feds.
All right. I'll check that out too. I appreciate the tip.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
Thanks so much. All right, so we had that call. Let me go to one more call before I go back to my guests in studio. David is on the line from St. John's. Hello.
Good day to you all.
Hey, how you doing?
I'd like to talk a little bit about, or get some reactions anyway, on diversification in finances and much bigger than that. I know it's some past student of economics, shall we say, and everybody I've ever sat down and talked to seriously about personal investment is that diversity is a hedge against something going terribly wrong in one area. And we have that now with the United States. We've been horribly undiversified for a very long time, and that has grown into a dependence. And I forget who it was, but there's that that saying about being an enemy of America is dangerous, being an ally is fatal? I didn't make that up. It's all over the news recently. And here we are about to spend maybe $50 to $75 billion to get a greater dependency on the Americans for defense by buying an airplane that they have some control over from the only country in the world that's ever threatened their sovereignty. And I'm just wondering.
Yeah, you're talking about the F-35,
I know it's a big problem. Yeah. Yep. And I know it's a real big problem because of intermeshing supply lines and political considerations. But
jobs and stuff, yeah.
Jobs and stuff, yeah, big time. But, you know, where do we draw the line at diversification versus greater dependence? Because it is a dependency, and we have seen the risk that it brings to our economy the same way it does to anybody who goes all in on an investment personally and find that, oops, everything I got in that one pocket just went down the tubes, you know. So I'd just like some discussion on this diversity issue.
Sure.
For people to think about when they're voting in this election this coming.
All right, David, thanks for the call. Put that to Larry, and you know, I appreciate your call as always.
Okay, thanks. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, so the F-35, I think that's what he's talking about, is the replacement fighter aircraft that Canada was going to buy from the U.S., and I mean was. The competitor was actually the Viggen out of Sweden. Yeah. It was a close second. And so all of that's being reconsidered. So I just wanted you to think for a second. Do you remember many years ago, Eisenhower talked about the threat of the U.S. military-industrial complex? One group that's really upset with Trump is the U.S. military-industrial complex because he's doing all he can right now to cause contract cancellations all over the world. I mean, you know, the entire conversation he was having with Europe was the fact that you guys aren't spending, 2% of your GNP on defense, but what they were spending was all on U.S. parts. Yeah. It was on maintenance. It was on updates. It was on new equipment. And all of that now is going to disappear. And even looking at U.S. defense stocks, they've dropped dramatically since Trump's come in, while the European stocks have actually gone up quite dramatically. So his point is well taken. The magic question is whether or not this is a one Trump event. I mean, is this going to be for the next 50 years, or is this going to be for the next 4 years, or even the next 2 years? And what I'm saying is that we're early days. We're in the honeymoon, seeing the U.S. public starting to get upset. Whether or not this will be maintained over the entire 4-year period, I'll be shocked if it is. I think that at some point here, the powers that be, and you can believe whatever that conspiracy theory is that you wish, of the day, but whether or not Trump will be able to continue to raise prices in the United States and destroy large parts of the economy, I don't think that's going to continue. But that Viggen is an extraordinary aircraft, and the whole of Western Europe now is looking at changing their mind about where they're going to go for the future.
I don't normally promo shows this far ahead, but next month, while we're still in the federal election campaign, I will be digging into the threats to sovereignty, NATO, look at the issue with the Arctic and patrolling there, procurement, and I just lined him up the other day. My guest, he'll be in town, retired Vice Admiral Mark Norman will be in town, fantastic. So he's going to be on the show. That's coming. It's the week after Easter. He's in town. He'll be on this show, and we're going to dig real far into these issues. So I'm really, really looking forward to that discussion. Audrey, any thoughts on just kind of everything else that we're bringing up here? There's it's kind of we're going defense to F-35s and everything, but like for what you're hearing, what are your thoughts? Dig into wherever you want.
Yes, I'm an American, so I also find all of this very fascinating. The Canadian perspective on American politics.
Yes,
my dirty secret these days. But I do think it'll be interesting. To your point, Larry, I think the truth will hit pretty soon, because in the United States, our tax filing day is coming up in April, and there's a lot of people who might not file taxes, right? So I think there's going to be a lot of questions about how much revenue will actually come into the U.S. government this year just from the IRS. And with the major culling of IRS agents, the number one way to generate revenue as a country is through taking in taxes. It's going to be really difficult times once the end of April comes around.
I actually have a question for you because when you were talking about circular economy, Japan has this program where they're not allowed to throw away appliances, basically.
Yes.
And, I do have a fridge that is in my house that I will be passing on to my grandchildren because it was made about 30 years ago.
Yeah.
But since then, I've had 3 other fridges, and I know that it's only 1 or 2 parts that fail and the whole assembly has to be thrown out. Is there anybody doing this work here in this province yet?
There are some really great manufacturing companies, and it's slipping my mind right now, but there is a company that does 3D printing in metal. And so they're able to then generate replacement parts for things that would fail. That would be metal. I believe they can also do with plastic as well. So the whole part about like what's really emerging, and a lot of this great stuff has come from kind of Genesis funded incubator projects, is the whole idea of digital twinning. And so if you're able to scan something or have at least the specifications of the particular part, you could have it reprinted in metal, and it could then be replaced in your part. I think it's hard, and Joe Lepowski on the previous show I was on talks a lot about the right to repair.
Right.
And so actually opening up the ability for companies to have to provide their part specifications and things like that, so that we as consumers have the ability to go out and source parts and have parts made in order to replace the parts that break, especially now that things are made more and more of plastic. They fail far more frequently than those that are made of metal.
But is there anybody in Newfoundland capturing the fridges on the way to Robin Hood Bay?
Yes. So we have a great metal recycling company here in the province, Newco Metal, that they're set up province-wide. And you could take your piece of equipment to them. They would sell, or they would buy it from you and pay you kind of the scrap price of the metal. And then they deal with the disposal.
Right. But there's nobody taking that and saying, here is the compressor node that failed and rebuilding it.
I think it's...
Because that's what's happening in Japan, right?
Yeah.
Yes. There are some small repair shops. I think that's becoming harder and harder for people to source, especially if you live outside of the metro region, right? If you're out in a remote community and your fridge fails and there is no repair person, you really don't have a ton of options. And so certainly
somebody should set up like a company to
it would be great.
Be under an incubator to capture those things, rebuild them, and then resell them.
I would love that. I think there are kind of one-offs of these, but having a larger resale shop would be fantastic. You could start this business.
A little busy right now.
Oh, you could have a side hustle. Come on, Larry.
Let's see.
Larry's Fridges and more.
Yes.
And beyond.
And beyond. Yes.
All right, we only have a couple of minutes left. What's as we wind this up here, or wind this down, I should say, for today, no crystal balls, but what are you looking at for the future now, Larry, for folks? We've covered a fair bit, but what are some things for folks to take away from this today?
Oh, key takeaways is if you're worried about the markets and particularly if you're getting close to retirement, sit with your financial advisor, financial planner, and make sure you understand what you're invested in, and see if there's any opportunities coming up. Because the other side of all of this is that if indeed we do get more turmoil here, and that's what the book is about, is when, generally speaking, when your friends are particularly upset about investing, it's time that you should be putting money into the market. Don't tell them that. But there's actually called the cocktail methodology of investing. Is you have a cocktail party of at least 30 people. And everybody, in order to get in, they have to write a note to you to say what they're invested in. And then you find out what most of them are invested in, and you do the opposite. So most of them are going into European stocks at this moment, and you go into U.S. stocks. You see what I mean? So go and sit with your financial advisor. And particularly if you have mortgages coming due, is to as well get some bidding that's happening there. But I think the next couple of months are going to be particularly interesting, but watch May.
All right. Thanks for that. And Audrey, do you want to just put out the info for if folks are curious about the incubator?
Yes. So again, go to our website, www.econext.ca, or you can send me an email at incubator@econext.ca, and I can answer any of your questions. But we have quite a lot of robust material available on our website, but our deadline is April 6th for applications. And again, we'd love to have any businesses, whether you're developing an app, whether you are developing a repair shop, whether you're taking an old material and giving it a new life, we would love to help you grow your business.
Excellent. Audrey Parnell, Larry Short, thanks so much for this.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, folks, that is it for another episode of The Signal. Looking ahead to tomorrow, we're sticking with talking about the federal election campaign. Tomorrow on the show, political science, sociology, anthropology, business. I've got folks coming over from Memorial University to talk about what they are watching in this federal election campaign. And again, tomorrow we're asking you, what issues do you think need more attention in the federal election campaign? The lines will be open tomorrow, so get in touch, call us, email us, you name it. We love hearing from you. The Signal at cbc.ca. The Signal line to leave a old-fashioned voice message, 709-576-5260. Until tomorrow, thanks for listening.